Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist. Today I'm bringing you another episode review from the Nightmare Room television show. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at Four Eyes. This episode was written by Scott Murphy and was directed by Brian Robbins. And if you don't know who Brian Robbins is, he was the director of movies like Good Burger back in the day. And I think his production company also was a main producer on this show. So go figure. But with that out the way, most people probably don't know what Four Eyes is unless you watched the Nightmare Room television show back in the day. And in case you didn't know, Four Eyes, along with some other episodes like School Spirit or Scare for What You Wish For, or even Tangled Web, were not put into the Nightmare Room book series. So this is a episode exclusive story you can only get here. And it wasn't written by R.L. Stine in any way. Now, I've been wanting to get to this episode for some time. I've actually seen it quite a few times for review purposes, and I just never had the energy to throw up a review. I watched this a while ago for the first time ever, back when I was kind of interested in looking at some John Carpenter throwbacks that were done in kids' horror, and I kind of fell out of interest rather quickly. This story is one of the handful of kids' horror stories that you might have heard of that homage a famous film from John Carpenter called They Live. And this episode here is quite literally a kids' horror version of that, done up a little bit differently. It's kind of like if you took They Live and mixed it with Calling All Creeps. If you like both of those things, this might be up your alley. But I have to say off the bat, having seen this episode now maybe 3 to 4 times, it gets a little worse every rewatch, and I noticed things I did not like beforehand. And I have some interesting thoughts about this episode overall, but if I were to go out of my way to recommend it, I probably would to you all to go check this out, especially if you are a fan of R.L. Stine properties and you want to experience anything that has his name tied to it. Go check this out. And if you're wondering what I'm holding here, this is actually a prop DVD made by my good friend Micah, who goes by the Ultimate Goosebumps Man. He made this as a custom for me because there was 5 episodes that never got released on DVD back in the day for this show, and Four Eyes was one of the 5. So take that for what you will. So yeah, let's get into the plot overview of the story now without giving too much away. So this story revolves around this guy named Jeremy, and he's played by this guy right here, and I don't know his name. I've seen him in a couple other things. He was in a teen comedy back in the 2000s called Sex Drive, and I think he was in a Disney Channel original movie called 'Twas the Night. So seeing him here is always fun. I think his name, what is his name? Joey Zuckerman? I don't know his name, but I think that's his last name. Anyways, he plays a character named Jeremy, and when the story starts off, he's at this eye doctor, and the eye doctor is played by an actor that you might recognize from a comedy show called Scrubs. So that's also a fun treat. And he's with his girlfriend Cindy, who's played by a girl that was in a sitcom that I loved as a kid called Grounded for Life. And the actress's name is Lindsay Bartleson. She's fantastic in this, as usual. Very underrated actress from this time. But he's with his girlfriend getting an eye exam, and he realizes that he has to get glasses, and the option for contacts isn't necessarily going to work for him because of his eye shape. And I can attest to this. Back in the early 2000s, because of my eye shape, I could not get contacts myself, so I had to wear glasses until they came up with contacts to fit certain shaped eyes. So it's pretty accurate on that front. But anyway, Jeremy, he gets his glasses, and he leaves the eye doctor with his girlfriend, and they part ways. And he's reminded by her to make sure that he wears his glasses so he can see better. And he stumbles across an alleyway with his glasses on, and he interacts with this homeless person who pretty much looks like a creature. And he's petrified of this, and he stumbles back, and he can't believe what he saw. And while he's running away, he runs into his girlfriend, who overheard his screams. And she's like, "What's going on with you?" And he's like, "Nothing." And it's not really like she would believe him, but he feels compelled that he needs to kind of expose what's going on with him, and as we'll see later on in the story. Well, after this event, it cuts to them going to school, and his girlfriend Cindy brings him up a flyer that some students passed out in the hallway, pretty much inviting them to this huge party at this barn later that day, and everybody's going to be there. And he's kind of excited to go, but at the same time, he's also worried about, what he's been experiencing with his glasses. And we get to see him essentially get hazed by his fellow classmates, kind of making fun of him for having glasses. Yes, this came out in 2001, I believe, maybe 2002. So there's some aspects about this story that is kind of dated, but literally a jock and like 4 other bullies kind of pick on him, and to get some revenge, he like squirts water in their face. It's really random, but he starts to kind of act like a whiny kid because he's getting picked on and all that, and he goes out into the hallway, to catch some air and go to his locker. But he feels like he's being stalked, and when he looks over, he sees a man in a raincoat kind of like shrouding over his face following him, and he freaks out and runs away and, makes a scene out of everything. And next thing you know, he's trying to hide out and, maybe observe some things going on, because after he gets scared off, he thinks he sees possibly some more aliens afoot. So this prompts him to want to go to the front office to talk with the principal about what's happening to him and maybe getting picked on, and possibly to warn people of this crazy phenomenon going on. But he looks over at the principal and notices that he kind of looks like the homeless person he saw from earlier, and realizes that he must be one of them. So he can't trust them. And essentially, he kind of starts to realize that ever since he's got these glasses, he's seeing that there's these creatures that are kind of hidden from the naked human eye, and only when he puts them on, he can see it. And then his girlfriend Cindy comes into play, and he's like, "Hey, look, put these glasses on. Do you see something weird?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, he has a brown suit on." So he realizes that he's kind of on his own with this, and he needs some answers. So he goes back to the eye doctor where he got these glasses from, and essentially he sees the raincoat there, which signifies that he was the guy with the raincoat a few moments earlier. And the doctor essentially tries to tell him to stop so he can explain what's going on. He tries to run away, but the doctor ends up capturing him outside, pinning him to a wall, and pretty much dropping a bombshell like in the middle of the episode, and pretty much what's going on. And it's that he's going to have to, help him find these aliens, essentially. And that's what these creatures have been. And he tells him that the glasses that he was given was accidental. The frames were the wrong frames, and he's been working on these, I guess, to uncover these aliens. But because he was pinning the kid to the wall, these 2 police officers corner the doctor and arrest him for assault, I guess. And the cops tell a kid to get to scramming. This doctor is loony, and he puts his glasses back on and notices that the police officers are also aliens. So because of the information he was told, Jeremy's led to believe that this party going on later on that night, the party that his girlfriend Cindy had a flyer to, is going to be compromised by these aliens. So he wants to go warn her at her home. But when he goes there, I might be telling these events out of order. He sees, he doesn't see his girlfriend Cindy in the house per se, but he overhears her mom saying that, oh, she's already gone to the party. And he's like, all right, well, I guess I got to go to the party now. So he has to braven up and go to this farm party where the climax of the episode takes place. And when he arrives there, he notices that some fellow students have already been compromised and turned into aliens. And I think because this is like a mid-portion reveal, this is not necessarily a spoiler, but essentially the aliens basically infect human cells, and then within like 30 minutes, they take over the human body and replace it with alien DNA, and all the humanity within the vessel is lost, essentially. So he notices that some of these kids have turned, and some haven't, like his bullies from school. And he also notices that his principal's there, And he was given a warning by the doctor that the leader most likely is going to have bright red eyes and is going to look noticeably different from everybody else. So he's actively looking for the leader, and he thinks that the principal might be it. So he's spying on it. He has some more interactions with the school bullies, unfortunately, though. And he realizes that he's kind of drawing more attention to himself than he needs to. And there comes to a point where he bumps into somebody, his glasses get fractured, and he gets more manic and panicked about it. And he can't find his girlfriend Cindy anywhere, so he's kind of wondering what's going on with her. And then as more attention grows on him, there's like a crowd of people forming around him as he's running away, screaming, "Get away from me, you're all monsters." And of course, everybody doesn't see what he's seeing behind his glasses, but he can see some people coming after him that look like aliens. And this prompts him to essentially fall out of a window out to the ground below. And then he picks up and runs away into the woods. And we see potentially some aliens following him. And then at the very end of the story, he ends up stumbling across a car that may or may not include Cindy and somebody else that he can trust. But there's a plot twist involving that in itself. And that's essentially where the story ends off for the episode. And that's essentially what you're going to expect out of the episode Four Eyes here. So let's go ahead and get into the review portion now. So at first, when I first watched this episode, I was really taken aback by how much I thought that this was a love letter to John Carpenter's They Live. And I still kind of feel that way, but after a few more watches, I start to kind of notice more flaws within it, because there's elements from an iconic Goosebumps story called Calling All Creeps kind of thrown in here. And I think because of the blending and outright ripping off of They Live, it starts to kind of, suffer a little bit as time goes on. But I will start with some positives here. In terms of acting performances, I think that this is some of the best acting I've seen in kids horror, period. I think the guy's name is Josh Zuckerman. I think that's his name now that I'm thinking about it. His acting isn't bad. Neither is Lindsay Bartleson's acting or any of the supporting cast, like the doctor from Scrubs or maybe the principal guy. He's kind of funny in some scenes he's in. There's really no bad performances. The prosthetic work on the aliens in this episode look very creepy and well done. It adds some eerie tension. And there's some messages in the story about who to trust and the paranoia that comes with that. And you can definitely see that on Jeremy's character as he's going throughout the story, kind of learning that there's this plot to end all humanity. And he's like pretty much reluctantly chosen to be the hero of the situation. This kind of rises him to become not necessarily an anti-hero, but more of a reluctant hero. And that's a cool arc to see in a character that you don't often get in kids' horror. I mean, you can say that most kids don't want themselves to be in these situations in these books, but they don't really feel the need to rise up to the occasion and be a hero. And in this story, he wants to save his girlfriend Cindy, and he also wants to help other people out in the process, but there's not much he can do to people that have already been affected, sadly, which kind of makes it bittersweet for his situation, because no matter how hard he's going to try, he's not going to be able to save everybody. And that's just a huge emotional weight to put on a character. And I can totally see why he's stressed throughout the episode, I guess. I will say, even for Nightmare Room's low budget, and you get that reuse school like you get in pretty much every episode, I will say that getting to see a town, somewhat involved, and getting to see like a farmhouse in the climax did kind of help the scope of the episode compared to some other ones I've seen. Even though I will say the pace kind of let it down, and of course the budget, but I don't know, it wasn't a stale episode. There was constant action happening. There was never a dull moment. There's some good tension building into the climax, some good red herrings here and there, because this is kind of recontextualized to be a mystery of who this alien leader is. So that's fun, and that's pretty much taken from They Live, so you kind of already know who to kind of look at, but at the same time, if you're not well versed in that, I can see why you can't predict it. So in terms of like story, and in terms of acting and the prosthetic work. There's some really solid positives to this episode. However, I do have some problems with it. More problems that I would have had if I would have reviewed this thing maybe like a year ago. I'm going to start off with the first one I have. I think the episode's pacing isn't fair enough to the concept or the story's idea. I honestly feel like there's some Nightmare Room episodes specifically that need more breadth than what the show was giving it. This show had a runtime of like on average like 20 minutes. And unlike Goosebumps, where the average was like exactly 21 to 22, or even Are You Afraid of the Dark that sometimes ran 23 to 24, the ad breaks for Nightmare Room were much grander. And there's also some cutaways where they end a scene for commercial breaks and they close the door for Nightmare Room and put the logo on. That eats up time. So the actual runtime for this show is on average lower than most other kids' horror shows. And I don't feel like the pacing in this story was good for its idea. This would have been a great two-parter to kind of build up more tension and more, to have more organic character development so we can kind of feel better about these characters, which I think we're getting into my second negative, is that there's really no distinct characterizing going on in the story. You don't really feel for these people other than, what they're going through in the moment, which I guess is relatable or commendable, but at the same time, it's not masterfully told like some top tier Goosebumps episodes with the room to make those iconic episodes pop. And it doesn't fare well for the characters as well here. I just feel like they could have been way better written. And getting into the third thing, there's some plot things about this story that come off kind of padded and also kind of plot holey. The whole thing with the doctor mixing up the lenses and stuff, I get it. It's kind of like, I'm trying to find a way to discover these aliens. I didn't mean to give it to this kid. I feel bad. But why is he following the kid around with the raincoat at school? Why isn't he just trying to, say, psst, come over here, I got to tell you something? What's up with that? It's unnecessary. And the whole reveal, the mid-portion reveal from the doctor, it comes so suddenly, and you're like, okay, how does he know all this information? Where is this all coming from? We hardly ever see the character other than the first scene of the episode, so all this info dump kind of comes across like, oh, this is just needed exposition and background so that way the character can know all this stuff going into the climax. It's padded. It's a padded episode, sadly, and it's noticeable here, especially in terms of that character. But like I said, when it comes to just the unveiling of the events and stuff like that, the story just feels overall rushed. And like I said, the pacing has majority to do with that. But even the writing here, it feels like they're kind of trying to take shortcuts with certain events so they can just kind of shoehorn it in and say, hey, look, this is what's going on. So there's that. And then kind of tied with that, there's a reveal at the end with who the leader is. And while that's cool and all, I feel like there's a huge plot hole in the story because Jeremy has the glasses early on. And if this person indeed was the leader, how did they not see them expose themselves immediately? It makes no sense whatsoever. It feels tacked on for that, and there's never really any explanation as to how or why this specific character was able to kind of hide from Jeremy, and that's annoying. And not to mention, if we're getting into more subjective things here, Jeremy can be annoying and whiny. Like there's some scenes that I feel like are kind of dated. Like the whole bullies bullying him for having glasses stuff is just really dumb, and him whining about it is annoying. And then there's some scenes where he kind of comes across like an idiot because he's not really putting things together like he should, or connecting the dots. He'll be going to a place where he knows there's going to be aliens and he doesn't have his glasses on, or he takes them off at points. I'm like, just keep your glasses on, dude. And the way he acts around people who he's suspicious of, he doesn't hide the fact that he knows that these people are who they are. And if he's not careful, he can easily expose himself, and they can just capture him at any point. And he's kind of careless on that, and it just kind of makes me wince a little bit. I'm like, dude, come on, you got to be a little more careful than that. But other than those things, honestly, if you want to knock it for being predictable, there's that too. But I'm more upset, not necessarily that the ending's predictable, because the implications of the ending is dark, so I like it. So I will be nicer to it, but I will say that the plot hole there holds it back more. Like I said, if you wanted to knock it for being predictable as well, I get it. But that's really all I have to say against it. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, I think School Spirit, this is a tough one for me because I like a lot about it, but I don't quite love it. And so love territory for me is like a 4.3 out of 5 or higher. So it's not getting that. And where I settled with this might shock a lot of you, because I know there seems to be a shifting narrative on YouTube, I guess, of people rediscovering this episode and kind of finding it to be a poorly made one, or they strongly dislike it or kind of dislike it. And I don't quite see that, but I can see its flaws. And, you know, it's not the worst thing ever like people make it out to be. I actually think it's way more commendable than most C-tier things out there, and it has more to offer for me. And maybe it's because I love They Live. Maybe it's because I love Calling All Creeps. That aspect kind of blending there does kind of get in the way sometimes, but it does work. So I'm willing to give this thing maybe like a B, but I was leaning towards a B- with this thing, and I decided to give this about a 4.1 out of 5 stars, and I deducted 0.9 off for those issues. I could have been way harsher than I wanted to be, but I wanted to give some extra points here for having some good prosthetics, a dark ending, and it's kind of memorable in my opinion. It could have been better, way better than what it was. It has its distinct flaws, kind of putting it here by default, but yeah, I really enjoyed this episode, and I definitely think that most people out there would enjoy this on a first-time watch. Maybe not this to the same extent as you keep rewatching it, but yeah, I have some hard confidence here that most people at least would enjoy this in some capacity. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Nightmare Rooms Four Eyes. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.